Hey everybody, Mary Fran Bontempo here. And before we get started with today's show, I just wanted to let you know that my new book, From Broken to Brilliant, How to Live a Brilliantly Resilient Life, is available on Amazon. Super excited about this book, which provides a roadmap of how to live a brilliantly resilient life. You'll get advice not only from me, but from so many dozens of our podcast guests who were kind enough to share their tips on how to reset, rise, and reveal your own brilliance. So head on over to Amazon, get a copy of the book From Broken to Brilliant, and now let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Brilliantly Resilient Podcast. What's your train wreck? Everyone has one. The question is, are you just visiting or are you going to live there? I'm Mary Fran Bontempo. Join me and let's learn how to come through those train wrecks, not broken, but brilliant. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Brilliantly Resilient Podcast. I'm Mary Fran Bontempo, and I have with me today Jim Sabellico, who I met Jim a couple of weeks ago when I was blessed to be on his podcast, and I just loved his story so much that I wanted to have him on Brilliantly Resilient. Jim is an entrepreneur, speaker, and a host of the No Half Cakes podcast. He helps high achievers define success by finding clarity, alignment, and purpose. He's built several 7 and 8 figure multi-million dollar businesses, but his most powerful stories started in front of half of a birthday cake. Jim, thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
I have to tell you, when I first heard the name of your podcast, I was like, okay, this is weird. But then I saw the story and it is incredibly powerful. So, first of all, tell me how you got to that point. Give me a little bit about your history in terms of your work life and family life and, where you found yourself that when this happened, you were like, whoa.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my first business when I was 8 years old, which sounds a little crazy,
Of course you
but
did.
as a kid growing up, I have an older brother and older sister who are 6 and 8 years older. And when I'm 8 years old, they are, in high school, they're hanging out with their friends. They just got a car, just got a license. They're not wanting to hang out with their 8 year old little brother on summer days. So for me, in summertime, I'm 8 years old. My brother and sister are supposed to be the ones watching me, making sure that I'm like entertained for the day while my parents are working. But they go off and do their own thing. So I said, hey, I'm not just going to sit around. Let me go do something productive, because that's the example I had of my dad. Was he was the first one to leave the house, the last one to come home. So I said, hey, let me do something productive. I grabbed the lawnmower and I would walk around the neighborhood and find people who needed their grass cut, and I would cut their grass. So as an 8 year old kid, I'm making like, maybe $200 a week cutting grass, which is crazy money for an 8 year old kid
It
with
sure
no
is.
expenses. I had like this early definition of success and freedom that was like, hey, mom, take me to the toy store. I'm going to buy whatever the heck I want. And you can't really say no, right? So that was the early definition of success that I had, and that felt great. So I continued to chase that feeling for most of my life, where it turned into I would walk people home on lunch break at school and install wallpapers and ringtones on their phone. That was when that kind of first came out. I've sold, you name it. I've been involved in a lot of different quote unquote side hustles through the years, but it always had this sense of whatever I decided to do in the business realm, I could do. I could sell water to a well. I could make money without a problem. And it definitely gave me this false sense of what success looked like. And continuing on that story, we got married. My wife said, "Hey, like we're gonna have a kid now at this point, right?" And for me, that was like, "Holy crap, this is for real!" Like, when she said, "Hey, we're pregnant," my instant reaction was like, "Oh crap, what do I do?" And then I realized, like, "Hey, we're married. Like, this is normal. It's okay." Uh,
I
and I
think I think
remember,
the women feel like that too, just not for nothing, but we have that oh crap feeling too.
So I remember my wife was working up until like right before she gave birth, and I remember when she came home on the last day of work, she had a bag, a tote bag in each hand, and she kind of just slumped in the living room and dropped them on the floor and said, "I don't care if I have to eat peanut butter and jelly for the rest of my life. I'm done working." And me and my provider brain, I said, "All right, got you. I will do the best I can as a husband and a provider because that, again, that was the example I had as a kid to go out there and provide for my wife and my family." And it sort of uh, checked off this thing in my brain where it said, "All right, now you're going to go into extreme provider mode." And I didn't really have a an idea of what to do as a dad, um,
Mm,
other than provide. So no knock to my father at all. Great dad, and he did the best that he could with the example he was given from his dad. But the example that I received was you leave really early in the morning, you come home late at night, you make sure that there's always money in the bank and there's food on the table. Like
mm,
that was the example of what a dad was to me. I didn't have the type of dad that was like, "Hey, let's go out in the street and have a catch, or let's go on a walk, or let's do whatever else." That's what he provided. And so for me, I defaulted into that. Again, go back to the childhood of thinking, "Hey, I can go out and make money. I can go do all these things. This is what I'm good at." No clue what to do with a kid. I was like, "All right, cool. I'll just go into provider mode." So that's what I did. And I would leave the house super early in the morning. I'd come home late at night. I would make sure that there was always money available, that there was whatever her needs were, she was covered. And all the credit to my wife. She is an amazing mother. And like, this is her gift. She could mother any child you could put in front of her. She will instantly create a connection. That kid will be happy. I don't know how she does it. It's a miracle to me, but gifted mother. So I was like, all right, cool. You are gifted at that. I'm gifted at this. We'll be good. Um, all that takes us to October 29th, 2019 was my son's sixth birthday. So I come home at 8:45 at night. And if you asked me what I was doing until 8:45 at night, I
mm.
literally could not tell you. But whatever it was on that day, I thought it was important. And I come home 8:45 at night and I'm like, all right, well, before we go to bed, let's obviously make sure we sing happy birthday. And my wife pulls out this half-eaten birthday cake and drops it on the table right in front of me.
Ugh.
And I'm standing there in that moment and I'm thinking like, you got to keep it together because your kids who are like rubbing the sleep out of their eyes, who are wanting to sing happy birthday again, because obviously I missed it the first time. They're like semi excited slash semi tired. My wife is frustrated because she had the kids all day long and she was dealing with the kids over after school and like the shenanigans that go on with that. And there I am standing in front of this half eaten birthday cake, realizing like, what am I doing? Like, this is not success. Like, yes, I have a nice house, I have a nice car, I've got money in the bank. Like, I've done the traditional success route, but I had like no relationship with my kids, no relationship with my wife. I barely knew myself, like in the worst physical shape I've ever been in. And by every other metric, a total failure.
Mm.
So that is where that expression came from, no have cakes, as a promise I made to myself standing there that night that I'm not doing this again. Like this definition of success is going to change where it's not just, you know, a house, bank account, car, traditional success in terms of like metrics you can measure. But like, hey, are you present in your life? Are you able to be at the things that you want to be at? Are you really enjoying this life that you've built, not just
Mm.
accumulating crap? So that to me was the promise that I made myself that night, and it's still something that I continue to pursue. And now I have these conversations like I had with you, where we talk about, hey, how do we continue to build this life where it's not just an amazing life, but we are present to really enjoy the life that we built.
There's so many things here that we can explore. And I guess you really hit on something that I don't think enough of us realize consciously as we move forward through our lives is that this stuff starts in childhood with what our perceptions of things are. I mean, my dad was the same. He went out in the morning, he came back at night, there was money in the bank. He was the big kind of gruff guy who was there, but not there in the sense of he didn't, first of all, he didn't know what to do with girls. So I mean, there was that. But I mean, at the same time, he was following the example of his father and I mean I don't think most people have as dramatic a personification of that as you did in that moment with that birthday cake. But it does bear actually stating that we really have to look at our childhood perceptions and awareness of things as we go through life, especially if you're feeling something's not right. Do you find that, or did you find that when you started to reflect on this, you hadn't been feeling right for a while, or was this just like, holy cow? Because I'm not sure how people get to that point all the time.
Yeah, it was a great question. And I think a lot of it has to do with the perspective that you get in that moment. Because, when you're going through it, you don't necessarily think about the role your parents play
Right,
for themselves. Like your parents are being parents for the first time, right? And you get to experience that along with them. And yeah, this is the first time you get to be a 6-year-old kid, but this is also the first time that they get to be a parent to a 6-year-old kid and all the random problems that come along with that. And as you start to be that yourself, you realize like there's a lot of crap that goes on. And you start to give them a little bit of grace. And I think that there's part of it that you feel frustration with, hey, the way that they raised me wasn't necessarily the way that I wanted to be raised.
right.
But you
But you
also
didn't
look
know
at,
that at the time. I mean, as a kid, you don't
of
know
course,
that. You
yes,
just figure this is the way it is. So when did that become a conscious awareness for you? Like in the moment, I'm kind of feeling like I see you standing in front of this half birthday cake, and then I'm seeing like this holy cow epiphany, like, oh my gosh, all this stuff kind of hitting you, and you thinking, I don't want to be the father my father was, not because he was a bad guy, but did that stuff start to come back to you?
100%. And I think right after that moment, right? So after I make this promise to myself, hey, I don't want to, be in front of a half cake again, came the resentment part
Mm,
of being mad at everybody. I was mad at my customers. I was mad at my parents. I was mad at my wife. I was mad at literally everybody. And I think shortly after that is when I started to go through the process of like recognizing that, hey, it's not their fault, right? I have to stop placing blame on other people. Firstly, let me say this. My parents did the absolute best that they could with the example that they were given,
yep,
right?
exactly.
I was not there to realize what they filtered out from the generation above them, right? Where, I've had these conversations now with my own father and having him tell me, he used to hear his dad talk about dropping him off at an adoption facility, or the fact that his dad told him, I love you, maybe 3 times in his entire life.
Yeah,
So, when you hear those sort of things and it gives you a little bit of perspective, for me, I needed more. So did he, right? And it is then when you learn grace and you learn, hey, it's a challenge for more people than just you. And it's difficult when your cup isn't being filled to worry about somebody else's cup. So it's part of the process you got to go through. I believe once you really recognize that and want to start on this journey to figure out how to be the best version of yourself, there's a lot of steps that you got to go through, and really gaining that perspective, I think, is really important. But there's another part of it too, which I really appreciate now, is looking at the people around us as somebody's kid.
mm,
You look at all of these people you come across in the course of a day, whether it's the person at the drive-through window or the person you meet at the store, whoever it is, and realize that they are also somebody's kid doing the best that they can with what they were given. And a lot of the people, the adults in this current generation, did not necessarily get all the stuff that they needed. So right now, everyone's got a lot of stuff they're carrying. And I think when you start to really understand that and you learn to give them grace, life becomes a little bit easier. And it's not always the simplest thing to do, right? Because grace is a challenge sometimes. We have to learn to just really, take a breath, take a step back and understand, hey, they're a little frustrated about their own life too. It's not necessarily on you, right? Instead of going at them, you can learn to like give them a little bit of space and help them kind of just see what they need to see. The example I often give is I can picture summertime, hanging out in the backyard, kids are in the pool. My daughter will yell, "Hey, Dad, look at me do this jump," right? And my daughter will jump off the diving board and do a little twist in the air and splash in the pool. And what is the very first thing that they do when they come up out of the water? Is they turn around and they look back at you because they want to know that they are being seen. And all of these adults that you interact with on a daily are just grown up little kids that are still looking to be seen. And a lot of us did not have that as kids. And now we're looking for that approval from social media likes and comments, or we're looking for it from other places in the world where we're getting that validation to be loved, appreciated, seen, and heard that we did not get as kids. So I think that's a really important perspective to have.
Well, I really love your use of the term give people grace because I say that a lot myself. It does take some introspection, which most of us figure we don't have time for rushing through our day. But even, 5 minutes at a time where you think back to, exactly to your point, I'm not feeling right about this, whatever this might be, and see where the roots of that are. And then, and I think it's important, and I'm sure you'll back this up, to recognize that you aren't going to have this monumental change in one day. This also becomes a process and it's a learning process. And it's something that um, we have to realize that we are always growing and evolving, and we always have the opportunity to do that. But most of us get immediately, like you said, you're going to be a parent. Okay, got to go into parent mode, got to be that, got to be this, got to be whatever the definition of wherever you are in life happens to be. And it doesn't allow us for a lot of time for introspection. But even those roles can evolve. As you said, your role as a parent can evolve, and your role as a husband and just as a human. I mean, allow yourself to evolve to find that place where you feel more settled. So how do you get this message across to other people? Like how and you're a guy. I said this when I said to you I wanted to interview, I'm like, I need to get a guy who can talk about this stuff because a lot of men have trouble talking about this kind of stuff and they don't know where to start because the nurtury, touchy-feely kind of stuff, which is not necessarily what I'm saying you're doing, but that's like a woman's area. So
Right.
how can you convey this to other men and try to tell them what are some of your strategies that you can work into their lives to get them to this point where they can let themselves evolve?
Great question and great observation, because it's definitely one of the core reasons why I have this conversation is there are not enough great examples of men who are willing to be a little soft or emotional, right? Because for a lot of us, it's looked down on, and you have to be
Well,
this,
and do you think it's vulnerability too? I mean, like you
yeah,
said, you have to be the provider,
100%.
you have to be the guy who takes care of everybody. And
Right.
all of this does require a little vulnerability, I imagine.
Yes. And I think there's a very big, there's an issue in society where uh, there's a lot of men who use pride and ego to bolster that sense of self-worth, because for a lot of us we didn't grow up feeling loved, appreciated, seen, and heard as who we were, so we have to put on this facade of, hey, I'm going to be emotionless, I'm going to just eat it and rub some dirt on it and walk away, because there has not been this space to turn to and say, hey, I'm struggling with X, Y, and Z. And what you find when you start having that conversation is literally every guy, so let me speak for the guys for a second here, has these feelings. We just don't talk to each other about it because we feel like we're the only one. We feel
Mm.
like, hey, I'm the only person who suffers with this. No one else will understand, or they'll make fun of me and look down on me and tell me I'm weak and I, should man up and get over it. It doesn't necessarily help, right? So the first thing that I would say people need to do is to get around someone who can help them feel seen, right? So it's have that conversation with someone
Mm.
who's not going to judge you, but it will hold space for you to say, hey, I hear you. I've been there. Tell me more. Right.
Mm.
So to get around at least one person who can make you feel seen, right? Because you cannot be good for other people if you cannot be good for yourself first. So
So
that
let me
was,
ask you really quickly
yeah,
then. if men and a lot of us, I mean, women, we're really good about just, getting it out there. But if a guy is in a certain role and doesn't feel like safe within his group or whatever, where do you find that? I mean, are you suggesting like a therapy? Because I know a lot of guys are like, where do they go?
I would advocate therapy for literally everybody.
I'm
And
right with you.
yeah, 100%. It is definitely beneficial. They're like, let's remove the stigma from that. It doesn't mean that you're broken, right? It just means you want to be a better version of yourself than you are today. Also, you're going to have to go through probably a couple therapists until you find the right one who will really resonate with you. Because it's not necessarily just about having the degree or like understanding how to dissect you. It's a relationship, and it's someone again who you have to be able to feel comfortable with. But therapy can come in a lot of different forms. It could come in form of friendship. It could come from someone you meet at church or you meet from your local sports league, or it could be a lot of different places. But you got to start with you have to start with understanding yourself, right? So the work has to come with knowing who you are authentically
Hmm.
and being comfortable with that version first. Because if you come off and you start to have a relationship where you're giving me the fake version of you because you think it's what I want to hear, or I'm going to reject you because whatever. We can't build a relationship on that, right? It's gonna lead the wrong place. It's like if I ask you for directions from here to California and you don't know where here is, directions will never work, right? So we got to start with who you are authentically first, and that requires a little bit of self work. It requires a little bit of vulnerability. And the thing that helped me in this space when I was going through this process was seeing an example of another guy do it. It was an example of, oh, hey, there's a guy who, by all traditional metrics, is successful, but who is willing to be vulnerable and who's willing to do that work. If he did it, so can I. Right. And for me, the best thing that ever happened to me was to have an example of followable excellence that was like, okay, cool. I've seen him do it. I see how he operates. I see how he moves. Let me soak up some of that. So now what I'm doing in this season of my life is being that for the person that I needed 6 years ago. So that's, I think a number one. And it's really just about having these conversations and not being afraid to be seen for who you are and recognizing that like literally every other dude you come across is probably struggling with something. We
Hmm.
are oftentimes just too afraid to admit it because we feel like it makes us look weak. It makes us look soft. And it's couldn't be further from the truth.
So, one of the things that I'm really hearing in this that may be a good starting point is for everyone to really take a look at their value system. Like, what's really important? What are the things that you would never compromise on? And for you, it was in that moment, it was your family. Like, I'm not compromising on my relationship with my kids again. So, maybe a starting point could be again look at that and hey, if you're not ready to talk to anybody yet, like make a little list of what your really core values are, what feeds you, what feeds your soul. Maybe that's a good place to start.
Yeah, 100%. And if you're not ready to talk to anyone, talk to yourself. Like journal, write it down. And I don't care if your journal is voice notes, if you're talking to Chat GPT, just voice the emotion and get it out there. And as you start to kind of verbalize these things, you're going to find that it helps in some way, shape, or form. And to go back to something you said before, one of the most important things to realize is this is not an on and off switch. This is not a skill that you can download. You can't buy it from Amazon Prime and get
Darn
it
it.
on your doorstep by 8 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
This is something that is going to be a 0.01% change every day for the rest of your life. And it builds up, it compounds. I'm a very different version of myself than I was a week ago, a really different version than I was 5 years ago. But I'm going to continue to grow, right? And that's the purpose of this is finding new ways to be a slightly better version of yourself and find out these little nuances and continue to just like develop one little skill, one relationship, one conversation, and to continue to be a little bit better than you were the day before. And I think that we need that patience to understand it takes time.
One of the things that I talk about in being brilliantly resilient is taking imperfect action because let's be honest, nothing you do is going to be perfect. There's always going to be one little thing that's off. So for me, it's a combination of making the right decision within the next 15 minutes. That was my story. When my son was going through his heroin addiction issues and all of that, I was down to 15 minutes at a time. But what I found was that that was actually a good benchmark for anything. Like, what can I do to make the next 15 minutes better, knowing that it's not going to be perfect, it's not going to solve every problem, but it'll make everything a little bit better. So, for guys, for men, for all of us, is it helpful to really break it down into moments? Because I think guys tend to think, like you said, big picture, money in the bank, success, all that kind of stuff. Does it help to break it down into smaller segments and moments and like, hey, if your choice is make a phone call or have a catch with your kid, what's the thing in the next 15 minutes that's the best thing to do? Does that a helpful barometer, maybe?
Possibly. I don't know that I've ever really considered it in the same fashion. I think men tend to be a little bit more direct and logical with their line of thought, where it's not necessarily as complicated a decision tree. It's more like an on or off, at least for me personally. So I think to me, it's more being comfortable with a decision that feeds you first, but not in a selfish way, and
Hmm.
understanding that taking care of yourself does not make you selfish, right? So we tend to look at being the provider. You want to be maybe the last one to eat. You're going to take care of everyone else first. You're going to look after the people in your tribe. You're going to sacrifice for them because that's the honorable thing to do. And we tend to think that's what we're supposed to do. We're called to kind of to sacrifice and provide for the people around us. But we need to provide for ourselves first.
Hmm.
So to me, I think the most important thing there is understanding that if you consciously put yourself first in that situation, you're able to be there for everyone else, right? So the order of this comes down to God, yourself, your spouse, and your kids. That is the order of operations in your life, or at least the way that it should be. A lot of people tend to do this completely backwards. You put your kids first because you think my kids are really important. I have to be there for my kids. They're a priority. And then with whatever time that you're not sucked up into your kids, which is literally all of your time, you give a little bit left to your spouse, right? Usually very unintentional. It's like whatever time is left, we'll high five in the hallway as we pass by each other. Then it's like, all right, cool. I'll get whatever time I can for myself. I'm hiding in the toilet. And then, right, faith comes almost never. Like in an emergency, it's your audible. And for me, I found when we reverse that, put your faith first, then focus on how do you build the best version of you, be intentional with your spouse, plan date nights, do things that cannot be interrupted, continue to date your spouse, not just, after you get married, you become roommates, but like, hey, let's do some intentional things. And even if you have to schedule them out on your calendar, whatever little trick or thing you need to do, get them done because that is really important. Because when the two of you are aligned, your kids, like taking care of your kids becomes easy because you're a team. And when there is tension between you and your spouse, literally nothing else matters. Nothing else will work. Right. So you have to put the order of operations right. You've got to do your faith first. You've got to take care of yourself. You have to build a relationship with your spouse. Then you can serve your kids. And then it all flows. It's way simpler. There's less friction that way.
I think you're basically talking about building a foundation for all of this continued work and growth and evolution of self. And I think you're absolutely right because when we have that firm foundation, not only in the moment does it work, but your kids are going to see that. They're going to, as you said, as back to the beginning of our conversation, that then becomes the example that they have of
Right.
what a healthy life looks like. And because you are then allowing time for your own self-care and nurturing and your relationships, they see that yes, they need emotional support and all that, but they also kids learn by observing. That's how
Yeah.
they get it. So I think that makes a whole lot of sense. You're basically talking about building a foundation, but kind of reversing what society says the structure should be.
Yes.
And how does this kind of view play in the world? Like how do are you fighting cultural norms here?
Yes. So here's the thing children cannot be what they cannot see.
Hmm.
Okay, so that's a really important thing that we have to understand. And when I talked before about right now, we're in a generation of dealing with adult children who did not get these things that they needed when they were kids. We have an opportunity now to change that momentum by providing a new generation of kids who feel loved, appreciated, seen, and heard, and not from a participation trophy generation. Like there's a very different level between that, where we need to celebrate them for who they are, who they've been gifted to be. If we do that now and we intentionally pour into our kids, the way that we do that is by being the best version of ourselves, living with honor and integrity. Then we can be present to raise the next generation of kids, and that's how we change the tide, right? That's how we start to move society in a direction. But it starts with us. It starts with us doing the work on ourselves, living with core values, living with integrity, doing the right thing, even when it's difficult. Then we're able to be the example for our children. The children are able to be the example for their friends. And that's when we get into this rising tide lifts all boats scenario, right?
Hmm.
We're trying to force politics and legislation into fixing the parents because there's a lot of parents who are doing some weird things. We're trying to force them into it. And what's happening is there's so much infighting at the top, the kids are suffering. So really what we do is if we start to focus on, hey, how do I be the best version of me? How do I show up for myself? How do I set a standard of followable excellence? How do I live a life that someone can be proud of? Right? It's almost like you're walking around and pretending that there's a documentary crew following you. Live that life, right? Act with honor and integrity. Where if someone found your phone and they found your dirty little secrets, you couldn't care less because you don't hold secrets, right? This freedom that you get to live in. I don't care if anyone comes to check out my internet history or come look into my life. I've got nothing to hide. I'll show it all. I'm proud of it because it's who I am. And I wasn't that way 5, 6 years ago. I am that way now because I understand that the people around me are soaking that up, whether I intend to or not. Because it's not the things that I am intentionally teaching them, it's the things that they see me do in real life. Right? That's what they pick up on. So I think that's what society needs right now is we need more men and women who are proud to stand up for who they are, not fighting with each other about who's more important. That's another big thing that we could probably go into a whole different conversation on. We don't need to decide who is more important, a man or a woman.
Hmm.
Okay? They're both equally important. And you have to, as men, let me say this very specifically for the men who are listening to this, you have to protect your queen because the queen can make moves that the king cannot. Okay? That is a chess reference, but it is really applicable for life. Okay, there are things that your wife will do for you that you cannot do for yourself. There are provisions she can provide for you. She can make a house into a home. Okay, there are things that your wife can do for you that you cannot, and you cannot compete with her for who is most important, who suffers the most, who is the quote unquote head of the household. Who freaking cares? Okay, there is a difference between who's the head of the house and who's the heart of the house. Neither one is more important than the other. Okay, they are both equally important. And when you stop fighting with each other about who suffers more and who's had a worse day, you can be freaking present for each other and both support each other for the different struggles that you have. That is when you will have a great relationship. It's not about who is more important than the other person. Your spouse is more important than you, and the vice versa is the same true. You should be more important than they are. When you build a relationship that is founded upon this teamwork where your spouse is more important than you and you put their priorities first, you will always have a situation where you take care of each other. That is what you need. Sorry for the rant.
Okay, no, I'm just gonna just sit here and listen to you talk for the next, I don't know, several hours, days, whatever, because all of this wisdom is so profound, and it really is a testament to your commitment to actually following through on some uncomfortable feelings. And that's an important thing. We don't like to be uncomfortable. I know, again, I reference my experience with my son because that's really when all of a lot of this started for me. But, I used denial and distraction for a very long time. You see things that aren't right, you feel things that are uncomfortable, but rather than get to the root of it, rather than do the work to make it better or change the perspective or do whatever you need to do, you deny it. And oh, this is just we're just going through a rough patch. He'll be fine, it'll be okay. And then we distract ourselves with the stuff that we have always thought was important. So I guess what I want to talk about, there's a couple of things that I still want to talk about. When you talked about kids being seen and heard and all that, I have a bunch of grandkids. and they're unique. Every child, every human is unique. But in looking at them from the I don't have to take care of their every need perspective, I see different things about them. One of the things that struck me about what you said was in you modeling the best version of yourself, you share your gifts with the world, your smarts, your business acumen, your whatever. But it also provides an opportunity for you to tell your child that their gifts may be different than yours. And I think that's important to tell our children too, because very often they feel like they have to be little mini me's of the parent.
Yep.
So is this a space also where you can say to your kids, "Hey, this is my thing. What's yours?" Like help them
Yes.
find what their thing is.
Yes, I think that's a very important thing, right? So both of our kids are very different in their skills and abilities. My son is great at math. My daughter struggles really hard. My son is very coordinated and excels at sports. My daughter is very clumsy. My daughter is exceptional at art and she is exceptional at her emotions. My son is not. Right. So rather than comparing them both against the perfect parent, and this is a really important thing that we have to share here, is helping them to see who they were gifted to be and be the best version of that, right? Not compare them against each other. And where I said not compare them against a perfect parent, a lot of the times what we wind up doing as parents is, again, whether it's ego or pride or just not knowing what to do, we don't share our struggles with our kids. And
Hmm.
I'm not saying that you should make your kids your therapist. There's a very big difference here. But your kids need to see you struggle. They need to understand that mom and dad are not perfect.
Hmm.
Okay. And again, fine line here. You can't be a total hot mess. You need to provide some standard in your household. But your kids need to see you struggle with stuff. A couple reasons. One is that it helps your kids understand that you are not perfect either, that you have strengths and you have weaknesses. It helps them to understand they too have strengths and weaknesses. It shows them how to handle their struggles. Right? It shows them, hey, when I struggle with something, what do I see my parents do? They struggle, they talk about it, they figure out a way forward, they lean on a resource, they move on. Okay, so it gives them a foundation to follow of, hey, when I struggle with something, what am I supposed to do? Again, kids cannot be what they cannot see. So if your kids don't see you struggle and work through problems, what are they going to do? You yelling at them and saying, hey, you need to go and do this isn't going to do them any good, right? So there's this like, and this is the way I grew up, right? You almost do it out of fear of getting yelled at, but
Hmm.
it doesn't really necessarily help, right? We have to really recognize, hey, these are your strengths, these are your weaknesses. Let us help you handle your weaknesses and strengthen your strengths. Like this is what we need to do for our kids is celebrate who they are, who they were gifted to be.
Okay, so I'm looking over my notes here because there are a million other things that I want to ask you. Um, let's shift back to the adult world here because these are the people that I think you can really have a wider impact on just because this is a message that you're speaking that they need to hear. Is there, I don't even know how to ask the question, but is there maybe a process that you can say, okay, here's where you start, and then you this, and then you that? What are some of the steps when you're speaking to people and advising them of how to align and, as you say, be able to enjoy the life they've worked so hard to build? What is the process that you kind of go through? And is it repeatable, for lack of a better term? Do you go through this yourself?
Yes. So there's a couple parts that you really got to start with, but the most important part to start with, like I said before, is really understanding who you are. Right. So when we are kids, we are not necessarily burdened by society and expectations of our parents, expectations of our friends. We are free to just be who we are. Now, what happens is society comes along and tells us what we're supposed to do, what we're not supposed to do, and gives us expectations and peer pressure. And then we build up this different version of ourselves out of protection. And then eventually we get to a point where everything comes crumbling down and we start to unfold all of that and get back to this original version that we started out as.
Hmm.
So it's this weird bell curve that we all go on. It's this journey we all take, some of us faster than others. But we eventually need to get back to who we are authentically, right? And who we feel like when we put our head on the pillow at night and we understand I operated as myself today, not this other version. I didn't have to put on a mask. And again, like I talked about before, this feeling of freedom where you can show up authentically as you and do not have to be worried about someone else's criticism of you, their judgment of you, because it's you. You know who you are. You know, at the end of the day, if you move with integrity and love and honor, you don't worry about that. Because if they're going to misinterpret that and people will misjudge you all day long, let them. You know who you are and you operate as you. So you have nothing to fear, nothing to hide. And that feeling of freedom
Hmm.
really helps, right? And like I said before, if you don't know where you are, no instructions will get you where you're going. You need to know your starting point. You need to know who you are. And a very large part of that, like I said before, is having an example of followable excellence, having relationships, having a spot to turn to where you can say, hey, Jim, this is what I'm feeling. Let me vent it out. Let me share it. Whether that's me, whether that's you, whether that's a friend that you happen to know. Again, whether it's a journal, start sharing these things until you can get around people who can hear and see you for who you are. And building these relationships where you're going to get to a spot where you feel loved, appreciated, seen, and heard, that is when the change is going to happen. Okay, but it has to go through this process of understanding who you are authentically, because then you have this set of core values to operate on. And when you have core values and you know what they are, life becomes super easy. You don't care if you're being judged because it doesn't really matter.
Hmm.
And you know exactly what decisions to make. In this moment, does it align with a core value? Yes or no? Okay, cool. Problem solved. If it aligns with the core value, do it. If it doesn't, don't. Really simple, right? But these are things that take time to develop, and they take relationship, and they take conversation, and they take time. If I haven't mentioned that, they take time. And so we need to go through this process. But a large part of that is having those people around you to help you stay on course. And I want to be very clear in saying this. I am not a perfect person. I still, yesterday, for example, struggle with stuff. Okay, there are times in my life, still to this day, where I struggle with stuff. But the difference is, at this stage of my life, I have built the relationships and the processes where I can get that feedback loop to be shorter. So instead of spending 5 years in this period of struggle, I
Hmm.
spend maybe 5 hours, maybe 5 minutes, but you recognize, hey, this is where I am. You can raise that red flag a little bit sooner, lean on a relationship, say, hey, here's where I'm at, journal it, have the conversation, process it, make a plan to move forward. Right. So you're never going to be a perfect person. It's just not going to be, right? So don't set that expectation for yourself, but have these relationships where you can raise that red flag when you need to and start to close that feedback loop where it gets shorter and shorter, right? Where this period of struggle becomes 5, 10 minutes, you figure it out, you process it, you move on. That's the goal of this.
So the very first thing is, to me, is don't ignore your gut. If
Yeah.
something doesn't feel right, it's not right. If something doesn't feel right, something is not right. So you start there and you figure out exactly what you said. If you know what to say yes to in terms of your core values, you always know what to say no to. And as you said, I want to point this out because that sense of freedom that you get from saying, "Hey, I did what I know I was supposed to do today. I was the person I was meant to be today." That's the basis for everything. And you do make mistakes. I always say to people, you're never going to arrive at being brilliantly resilient and that's your permanent state of mind, if only.
Yeah.
It's a process. Um, I can't tell you how much I love this conversation. I could talk to you for hours more. But I would like for you to, if there's anything you want to leave our people with here, please do that now. And then I want to find out where people can find out more about you because we all definitely need more of Jim Sabellico in our lives.
Thank you. What I would leave you with is this. I want you to imagine when you come home at the end of the day, and whether that's at 5 o'clock or it's 8:45 at night, whatever it is, and you open up that front door of your life and you step in, what are you coming home to? And it's going to be a hard thing to think about, right? It might not always feel good. It might be frustrating to think, hey, I'm not super happy with my life right now. But it's only you versus you in that moment. And if you got to be honest with yourself and say, hey, man, there's some stuff in my life right now where I'm not happy with. I'm not happy with my relationship. I'm not happy with how I feel about X, Y, and Z. Take a look. Okay. Think about when you come home again, the proverbial end of your day, and you step into your life. What are you stepping into? What are you coming home to? What kind of life have you built for yourself? Are you happy? Truly happy? Are you truly successful? Or are there some things you want to work on? And be honest with yourself. Because again, it's you versus you, and lying to yourself is not going to help. You might feel comfortable in the moment, but that debt is going to come due at some point, and it's only going to get worse. So seriously consider your life right now. Think about, hey, what are the things that I want to improve? And there's going to be something for everyone. There's this little nagging thing that you know is happening, but you just don't want to give it a name. Name it. Okay, one of the best freaking things I've ever done was 8:45 at night. I gave meaning to the moment. It could have been another moment in my life where I just said, man, that sucks. All right, let me go on to check my email or do something else. But you name the moment. You give meaning to the moment. You say, hey, this is the moment right now where I am going to do something different, where I'm going to change the course. I'm going to look back on this day, on this moment where I heard this podcast. I'm going to say, this was the moment where I decided I'm not accepting that anymore in my life. I'm giving meaning to this moment right now, where I am going to make a difference in my life, where I'm going to push forward. And I know that there's going to be some times of struggle. There's going to be some times of pain. There's going to be some times of difficulty, but I am not going backwards. I'm going to continue to push forward. I'm going to build the relationships. I'm going to build the life that I want, the life that I deserve, because you do deserve it. Okay, you are worth it. And I need you to know that.
Brilliant. Where can people find out more about you, and where is the podcast? I'm assuming it's airing all over the place. Where is it? Where can we find you?
Yeah. You can find me anywhere at Jim Sabellico. So Jim Sabellico on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn. My website's jimsabellico.com. If you look up Jim Sabellico, you will only find me. I'm the only one that there is. So yeah, pretty easy guy to find.
Jim, this has been a brilliant conversation. I am so appreciative. I'm so happy that we got to know each other. And if you need a little bit more brilliance in your life, you can all head on over to brilliantlyresilient.net, where you can sign up with one of those little pop-up thingies for our Brilliance Bit. Jim will be a part of that when this episode airs. And I will see you all next time on the next episode of the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. Join our Facebook group and follow us on YouTube to be inspired with tools to reset, rise, and reveal your brilliance.